which was amazing. The engineers would work with all the shell fire and sniping on their building. If anybody got wounded, he was dragged back, and another guy crept up and took his place. Really marvelous.
Once the bridge is completed, the Canadians gain firm control of both banks of the canal. Thanks to Jack Gallagher and his men, never again would Canadian blood be shed over the Leopold. The final act in the Battle of the Breskins Pocket comes in early October when Canadian troops strike in force from the sea. Caught from behind and with no hope of withdrawal, German defenders fight to the last. Horrible losses on both sides ensue, but eventually the pocket is liquidated and the South Scheldt cleared. On the northern bank, however, the battle rages on. Near the town of Woensdrecht, the Black Watch attack a heavily defended German position. The date is Friday, October the 13th.
Our job, they told us, was to shut off the bottom of the peninsula, which would trap the German, and it would be pretty near all over by then. I don't know whose crystal ball they were looking in, but it didn't turn out that way.
Bill Davis and every soldier in the Black Watch knew this would be a daunting task. Despite protests from the Black Watch that the plan is fundamentally unsound, High Command orders the attack to commence.
We were told we were going in at dawn. Everybody was uptight, it was cold and miserable. And when dawn came and we looked across where we were going to go, and everybody started wondering, how the heck are we ever going to get across that? As soon as we get up to move, then we found out there was a lot. The small arms fire was like a solid wall hitting that road. Trying to get across that road was just committing suicide.
Due to intense German fire, the Black Watch are forced to pull back in haste. Late in the afternoon, to their shock and dismay, another attack is ordered.
I honestly couldn't tell you when the second attack was ordered in, but we really couldn't believe the order when it came down to move out again.
In some cases, terrain conditions are more frightening than the German fire.
Flat as you imagine anything, a pool table, that flat, maybe 1,000 yards wide and 1,000 yards long, and with a dike with a road on top of it surrounding it. At that time of year, it was mud. It was almost impossible to run. Some guys were crawling. I still to this day don't know how we ever got across that field and to the dike, but some of us made it. I was one of the lucky ones, I guess. And when you got to the dikes, it was almost impossible to dig in because they were so hard to dig. Trying to use our shovels or any damn thing to make some kind of a hole. It was a war of grenades almost at that time. And it was a fight to see who was going to control the top of that dike. But the guys were laying and hollering, and if there's anything that gets to you, it's when you know somebody's out there wounded and you can't get to them, or you know that if you even try, it's committing suicide. And the Germans took advantage of that too. You know, they would fire a few rounds all around the wounded guy and get him all excited if he wasn't excited enough as it was. No, that part you always have to live with, and maybe you could have got him, maybe you could have got him, but at the time you knew bloody well that you couldn't get him, you know. We stayed there then till, oh God, I guess it was 11 or 12 o'clock at night when a runner, who I don't know who he was, but I'd sure like to bless him if I ever found out, come up and said, "Get out." So we carried as many wounded as we could. There was only 20 of us left. Well, the fate of the Black Watch on the 13th, I lay directly at the big brass. I don't know what they knew about the situation, but it was quite obvious because the RCRs had tried to do exactly the same thing we were told as we did and got the heck beat out of them, and to send in the Watch to try and do it over again, not just once, but twice, seemed to us that the Army was being run by a bunch of nitwits. Any confidence we had in the senior leadership went out the window. What a waste. What a waste. In 204, we put a plaque up at Woensdrecht, and we were welcomed with open arms by the whole community. But all of those fellas now have been moved to the cemetery at Bergen-op-Zoom, and it was like reading the roster in the morning to just walk up and down there. I thought, you know, what a waste, all of these fellas to accomplish nothing. We accomplished absolutely nothing that day. I think all of those guys were prepared to die, but for something, not to just throw your life away. That's the way I feel.
After the massacre at Woensdrecht, it takes over a month to clear the Scheldt and to open the port of Antwerp. But the Allies pay a heavy price for success. Nearly 13,000 men are lost in the 6-week battle, half of them Canadian. In February 1945, the Allies line up in these fields to strike into the very heart of the Rhineland. The war is now coming home to Nazi Germany, and the fight will be desperate and horrific. The Battle of the Rhineland rages on for 6 bloody weeks. The Allied objective is the Rhine River, the last barrier to the Nazi homeland. But to reach it, the Canadians first have to fight a series of nasty and costly battles. One in particular takes place in the tiny hamlet of Mooshoff. Near these humble buildings, one of Canada's most heroic acts of the war takes place. On February 26th, a 24-year-old sergeant named Aubrey Cousins from the Queen's Own Rifles will earn the highest award for valor to be bestowed upon a Canadian soldier.
Aubrey Cousins' Victoria Cross was won towards the end of the day. They had come a long way, and they had one tank in support.
The officer had been killed And then Aubrey's platoon is pretty well wiped out. And he's left with about 4 men.